Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and I'm very excited today to have a special live stream with a guest, CEO of Coursera, Jeff Maggioncalda. So here's Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for joining today.
It's
Welcome.
it's it's great to be here. Thank you. I'm obviously super excited about this topic, and I really appreciate being invited onto your show.
That's right. So let's just get into it. Jeff, tell us a little bit about your journey. You're the CEO of a very large, successful public company. You're using generative AI. How did you begin doing this? And tell us a story. You have some presentations, some demos. So
Yeah, I was an English major as an undergrad. I've been a CEO for probably 27 years. I when I was 27, I was the first employee at a fintech company called Financial Engines. We raised a series A, B, C, D, E, F, and then finally went public in 2010. Stayed there for another 5 years as a public company CEO. Took a couple years off, and then came back to Coursera in 2017, did a series E, F, and then an IPO in 2021. And as you said, we're now a public company. And when I first touched ChatGPT, I mean, so many things fired off all simultaneously. One said learning and teaching will never be the same. Another thing said we can serve so many more learners than we ever have before. Another thing said we're going to have competition coming from all over the place as new companies use this technology to generate new content. And then another said, my life will never be the same again. I mean, separate from being a CEO, let alone at Coursera, I think the way that humans think and the impact this is going to have on cognitive processes, including, who does it, how they do it, where they do it, et cetera, I think is going to be forever change. And so I said, I need to learn this myself. And I got way into it, and we reset the strategy for Coursera, and we're now doing a ton of stuff that I won't talk a lot about, but I tried to pull all this stuff together into an online course that I just launched to try to help CEOs kind of navigate this together, because honestly, it's changing so fast. I don't have all the answers. None of us have all the answers. But I think if we kind of share what we're learning, like you're doing here, Charlene, I think that's the best service that we can provide to each other.
yes, and I'm just going to put the link up here, and I'll put it into the comments. If again, I can't post the LinkedIn, so somebody can take the URL and post it onto there, because a lot of people on there. But you can see it's an amazing course, Navigating Generative AI, a CEO Playbook. I've gone through the course super quickly, and it's amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. And I also just will say, if you have any questions, post them into the comments, and we'll have some time and ability to ask them along the way. So, Jeff, I think you have some slides that you would love to show. Let me just put them up here.
Yeah. Does it say video 4?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is all content that's in the course. It's also, this comes from speeches that I've given over the last year that kind of got folded in. I'll kind of do a live version of some of the most important things that I think CEOs should be aware of. And then maybe we'll go to Q&A. So at the expense of probably being highly rushed, I just kind of want to lay out for the folks out here, like, why do I think this is such a big thing for CEOs, and what does it mean that CEOs might need to do differently? So I'll just quickly go through this, but my prescription for CEOs is this is going to change your company, almost every company. It's going to change your job and almost everybody else's job, because it's going to change the way that we think. It'll change the way that we communicate our thinking. And I'll kind of lay out my case for that. But what I say at the beginning of the course is basically these 6 points, which is get hands-on fast so you can become familiar with it, pull a team together, develop your own strategic point of view that you'll then iterate as you learn and as the world changes. Then you want to engage your broader company, make sure you set your ethical principles so there are boundaries around what people can and cannot do and should not do. And then fasten your seatbelt, because we're all going to be learning very rapidly. I have a little module here that kind of just motivates why I think that CEOs who don't do this are going to fall behind. Basically, it's because it enhances the cognitive power of anybody that uses it if they use it wisely. And I think that CEOs are in the business of thinking and strategizing, deciding and communicating, synthesizing ideas and integrating ideas. And so as a thought partner, this is just an indispensable tool. And I'll give you a quick idea of what that looks like. But just to show you how people's perceptions are changing, in the course, I point out Douglas Hofstadter. He's a very famous neuroscientist who in 2022 said, not super impressed. fast forward to 2023, he said, human beings are soon going to be eclipsed. AI will become incomprehensible to us as we are to cockroaches. And so, none of us wants to be a cockroach, but clearly very, very smart people are anticipating that this technology will become so powerful that it will change the basis for how we think and do our jobs. I think there's something very powerful about language. I won't read this. I talk a little bit more about it in the course, but these large language models, because thought is expressed in language, and these large language models find patterns of language in written words, they're also finding patterns of meaning. And just as they can recombine passages of words, they can also recombine ideas. And if you use these tools the right way, they can be incredible as a thought partner. So I'll talk a little bit about how that works in a sec. But just as a starting point, if you have an idea, we all have ideas. It's like, yeah, I think I have an idea about this certain sort of thing. You often will talk to somebody about it. And this is sort of the old-fashioned world where you're talking to someone who has a brain, a human brain. You're like, what do you think of this idea? And I'm like, here's what I think of the idea. And you kind of go back and forth. And by virtue of you talking about your idea and subjecting it to criticism and scrutiny, and sometimes empirical testing, it sharpens a little bit. It's like, okay, now I think I know what this idea is. Well, generative AI can be pretty similar. It's that instead of a human brain that you're talking to, it's a artificial brain that you're talking to. And until very recently, these brains were pretty lame. They couldn't do very capable things. And so you'd want to share an idea and it would say something pretty nonsensical or not very valuable. But what's happened is these brains have become much, much smarter. With GPT-4, started with 3.5, but with GPT-4, Google Gemini Pro is looking pretty good. Gemini Ultra is looking very powerful. I've seen pre-release versions of this, and now OpenAI is working on GPT-5. So these brains are going to be getting faster and faster and better, and you can interact with them like you would a human being. What they can do is they can help you generate ideas, summarize ideas, explain, analyze, evaluate, compare, synthesize, advise, and communicate. So this is what I use the LLMs to do pretty much every day. So far today, I've already done it multiple times on things I've been thinking about. I talk to it all the time. And I'll show you really quickly how that works. But the point I want to make is, in the last couple years, these things are getting way, way, way smarter. 100 times in terms of the amount of context you can put in, 1,000 times in terms of the nodes. And if you look at NVIDIA stock price and why it's getting so big, everyone's buying compute. Like everyone's buying compute. And what the compute is doing is it's training these things on more and more nodes, not even necessarily more language, just deeper and deeper neural networks that can find more and more sort of basic patterns of meaning in there. So I would say if you're not ready to get started, please don't wait, because by the time you turn around, GPT-5 is out. The people using these types of tools are going to have a thought partner that might be more capable than most humans, including people on your executive team, if you feed it with the right context. All right, Charlene, tell me how I'm doing. I was going to go through a little study from BCG, but any questions or comments so far?
You said you already used it several times this morning.
Yep.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast.
Yep.
So I'm curious, give us some examples of how you use generative AI as
a so if I go to the course here, so in the course, this is actually a course on Coursera, and you can see welcome to the course, etc. And there's a little lesson called CEO Toolkit, use generative AI as your thought partner. And most of these are videos where I'm showing the slides like I'm just doing now live. But if I click Launch Playground, what this will do is it'll actually launch inside the course a secure, private, large language model. The course right now is running on Google Gemini Pro with the 32,000 token window, so you could put a lot of stuff into it. And so what happens is, you get little instructions here that describes how you use this playground. But basically, it's like ChatGPT, except Coursera. No one from Coursera can see what you type into it, and nobody can train models on it. It goes right to Google on Google Cloud Platform, and it subscribes to all those rules. So what I do in the course is I actually give you these context prompts. And so if I wanted to compare two things, and I have these little samples, I can say, compare context A and context B, identifying key similarities. Actually, I won't do that one right now. Let me give you an example of what I actually did this morning. I was getting ready for a presentation. Some people in my company wanted, after Davos, they're like, Jeff, what did you learn about generative AI in Davos, and how will that affect our strategy? And so I spent, probably 20 minutes kind of typing up my ideas, not using ChatGPT at all. And I always do this now, I always check my thinking I usually use Playground. So I usually use the GPT-4 with the 128K. That's kind of my go-to model. But in the course, you have Gemini Pro. And then what I do is I'll give the GPT my thinking. I'll be like, I'm about to give a presentation about generative AI. Here's my current thinking. And I say, what are the weaknesses here? What are the blind spots? What points am I making that might be wrong? What points am I not making that maybe I should be making because they make it more persuasive? And then how would you otherwise improve this? And it talks to me. It looks at my stuff. It says, well, what about this? And I say, well, what about that? And we talk. And then I end up with something that I then go back and I update my my point of view. So in the course, and I don't know if it'll really work on full screen mode here, but I have samples of these context prompts, so that what you can do in the course is you can get access to the prompts, and then you can paste them right into the large language model. So in this case, there is the sample prompt is actually a full description of Coursera from our 10K. Because what I find is that using a large language model is way better if you give it context about what you're looking for. So here's a document. I just put it as a PDF into the course, and it's 7 pages long, and it's just a description of Coursera. And there's a way that I write the prompt that says, consider this business. And then let's see if I can get back to the. Let's see here. Let's get back to the LLM. Okay. So now I can come back here, and in here I can put in my prompt, and I can say, consider the following description of Coursera's business and reply, I understand Coursera's business and strategy, but do not explain. And then I copy and paste this entire description of Coursera. And then it's going to say, I understand the business. I don't want it to do anything yet. I just want to load this into the large language model. But now what I can say is what might be the impact of generative AI on the way that Coursera, I'm not going to just make something up there, the way that Coursera creates content. And because I told it not everything, but a lot of stuff about Coursera, it can use that context grounding in order to give me very personalized and valuable feedback. So you can say, well, the impact on Coursera might be personalized learning experience, enhanced content, increased content production efficiency. Let's just dive into point 3. I say, I'm interested in point 3. Tell me more about how we might increase efficiency using Gen AI. And so when you're talking to this thing, it'll give you a little bit of feedback, and then you can dig into it and say, tell me more about that. And then you can engage with it. So in the course, and so you can see now this is a drill down on how Coursera might use generative AI to increase the efficiency of creating content. And then if I wanted to, I could drill into here. I could say, tell me more about personal learning paths. And I don't think that would really work. I could argue with it. I could debate it and things like that. So that's what a lot of the course is about, is basically the ability to use one of these large language models in order to increase the way that you interact with the models. And there's been research, that's what this is. There's been research by a number of firms now that show that cognitive ability goes way up when people who use generative AI versus not. So I'll just do one more thing and then we'll take a quick break. But this was 758 consultants at BCG and Harvard Business School did a study where they looked at task performance, not using GPT. And they said the average performance is this. And then here's the people, the lower half and the upper half. Then they gave them GPT, and look what happened. First of all, the average went way up. So average performance went way up. So that's kind of number one. Number two, if you look at the distribution got much more narrow. So average performance went way up. There was a lot less difference between the low performers and the high performers. And then when you look at each, in the histogram at each level of performance, there's an equal number of previously low performers and high performers for every level of performance. And what this means is that generative AI has an equalizing effect on people's cognitive abilities. It actually has a bigger improvement on people with lower, I shouldn't say cognitive ability, but their ability to perform these tasks. The lower performers see a bigger improvement than the higher performers. And so what you're left with is this tool that really has a big impact on people's abilities, and especially those who are less capable, going into it. And I think, frankly, that's pretty exciting, because it could help reduce disparities and tap into a lot more human talent that's out there around the world.
Jeff, thank you so much. That last point, I think, is a really thing I want to key off of here, which is, you talked about how in your slides that CEOs who are not using this will fail. I mean, it's a very strong statement. But you're also seeing the benefits of this across the organizations. And I want to talk about, from the leadership perspective, how it's one thing for you to get on board. And I'll just put up a question from Lewis here, is before you even get to step one, getting started, how do you as an executive overcome inertia and paralysis from fear of risk, of compliance, legal, lack of employee trust? So I'm curious, you were very excited about this. How did you go about doing this with Coursera? And also in your discussions with other executives, how are they overcoming that inertia?
Well, it's hard, and I think most are not overcoming the inertia. And it's a really good point, because I actually call it the change challenge. The biggest challenge that executives, especially CEOs, are going to face is what I call the change challenge. It is inertia. It's, even with this capability there, it's hard to figure out how to tap into it. It could be threatening to a lot of people. There are risks out there. And so it's very easy to say, you know what, let's kind of just get to this a little bit later. Let's figure out a little bit more, let other people pave the way, and then we'll follow. For me, since I've been a CEO for a long time, my style is I will always learn things hands-on. I like to learn things, and then I feel like I could be a better leader when I understand. And the way I understand is by using it. So when ChatGPT came out, I personally just bought 2 accounts. You could register 2 accounts on ChatGPT back in December of 2022. I bought 2 accounts before anyone even at the company even knew what was going on. Then I went to our people and our general counsel and our head of engineering, and I said, this thing's going to change everything. How can we I did 2 things. I said, first of all, let's have the company buy ChatGPT Plus for every single employee in the company. And there's like 1,000 people in the company. And it was not cheap. It was really quite expensive. And then, it's like, well, but wait a sec. What about data security? What about privacy? I said, well, that is a concern. Let's just tell people, do not assume that everything you type is going to show up on the internet. Do not put confidential information into this thing. Wait, we're working on getting our own private access. Until we do, play around with this, but don't put anything confidential in. And we just said it. And I just trusted people. I was like, let's just trust that people are going to do the right thing here. And if they know that we're working on getting a private access where you can put in confidential stuff, hopefully, we thought we'd maybe 3 to 4 months is what it might take. It ultimately only took a couple months. We just thought, that we can respect and honor and trust our team. And so we did. And so we went for it. We wrote big checks. We bought licenses for everybody. We told everybody, don't put in, confidential stuff. We're working on it. And then pretty quickly, we came up with our own enterprise version of Playground. We now have 9 different large language models that our team can be using when the new one comes out from whomever, whether that's Google or whether that's AWS or whether that's OpenAI or Azure or whatever. And now there's a great safe environment to do it. But we just kind of jumped in and kind of just said to folks, we did 2 things. We said, don't put confidential information in until you have our own secure Playground. And then we quickly developed ethical statements. We said, this is how we are going to and not going to use this, because if people start experimenting in ways that weren't right, we didn't want that to get away. So those are the 2 things that we did pretty quickly.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's interesting because that can be very risky depending on the type of company you have. So, but you have a different type of company than, for example, a bank, or a healthcare company.
Yes.
So depending on your situation, you may not be able to do that.
Yeah.
because the ability to, the trackability, so many other things. But I agree with this whole idea of training people, giving people guidelines of what is safe, what isn't safe, and then as quickly as possible, creating your own playground.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, Charlene, another thing that's true, survey after survey after survey shows employees are using this someplace or other. So if you don't provide the safe, secure way to do it, they're going to be putting stuff into Chat GPT. They just are. They are. They say that they are. Everybody says that they are. And so it's not like, oh, if I don't give them access, then they won't use it. They're going to use it. And so it's like, well, make sure you give them safe access and do it quickly. So yes, it is different for different companies, but employees, generally speaking, they're very interested in using this. And so, make sure it's a safe way to use it.
Yeah, because it's clear the minute you try it, you're like, oh, I could use this in so many ways. And okay, I won't tell anybody. I'll just be really careful. I'll do it on my, different browser, incognito, whatever.
Yeah, right.
So, but don't track it.
Yep.
You can actually see it on your own company records. Just go and ask IT to see how many times ChatGPT or any like Dolly is majority are being used, and you'll be shocked how often.
And another thing too, Charlene, is as I just showed in that little example there, the most valuable information is often the stuff that's actually private and confidential. Now, I will say that the company, in the example I just used, the company information, that's all public information. It's in our 10K. So there is actually a lot of value you could use from public information. But I do think a lot of people want to use it for sales calls, for marketing material, for coding help. And a lot of that is proprietary confidential information to the company. So you want to set up that internal playground that's safe and secure.
Great. I have a couple quick questions. I'm a little bit more technical than others.
Yep.
So you can see this one from Bill French. Was your purchase of ChatGPT contingent upon opting data out of training use of that data?
We started before they even had that feature. I mean, it was just one of those things. And it was a judgment call. And I just said, look, don't put private stuff in. They didn't have that feature. And I just said, this is so important. And we need to move so quickly that we're just going to be very clear about what you can and cannot do. And we're going to trust that you do the right thing. Now, once that came out, we did say, hey, flip that little lever. But we pretty quickly moved to, we use at Coursera, our playground. It's an open source piece of software that runs inside Coursera. And then we have our own enterprise key to a bunch of the Azure OpenAI models on Azure. We have the Google models all on Google Cloud. And we have a bunch of the cloud models on Amazon. So all of our models only run on either Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. Those are the only three platforms. And they have all assured us, as GDPR compliant systems, they're like, we do not train any models based on what's coming through this enterprise access on those three platforms.
Fantastic. And again, it's the if the company is large enough, you want to dedicate enough resources, the private GPTs, the private versions of this is the way to go.
Yeah.
Because you can be fully assured that everything is completely private and not training the model.
And another thing, Charlene, it's kind of interesting. People who are really sensitive about it, and I understand that, but when people write, almost nobody has on-prem stuff anymore. It's in the cloud somewhere. It's almost always either on Azure or Google or AWS. My earnings calls are all on, Google Docs before the earnings call, and all of our code are in repositories on GitHub and stuff. So the stuff is out there. The question is not, do you let it go into the cloud? The question is, where on the cloud do you let it go, and who is going to be the provider that you can trust to keep it secure?
Exactly. Speaking of trust, on a different level, Mark Evans has a question. If trust is a major source of inertia, how do you educate the business people on the power of RAG to minimize accuracy, et cetera? For example, hallucinations.
So, Mark, great question. And I don't mean to just take my course. But in my course, there's a few different, there are four basic modules to the course. And I think that they're all essential for a CEO. Number one is what is this and what is your role as a CEO in dealing with it? And that's where I talk about Thought Partner and how fast it's moving. There's also a little section taught by Andrew Ng on how large language models work at a pretty high level. The second one is about setting your strategy, and you actually use the lab to set your strategy. Third is about organizational transformation, and the fourth is about risks. But in the strategy piece, the chief AI officer of Orange actually gives a little 8-minute lecture on should you train your own models or not. And he talks about RAG, and he says, when do you do fine tuning and when should you use RAG, et cetera. There's a lot of companies saying, hey, the CEO can take Jeff's course. I want all my executives to take this course, because it doesn't go into detail. It will not make you an expert, but it covers all the bases, including the one that Mark mentions, which is, when do I fine tune? Should I use RAG? This context grounding does reduce hallucinations a lot. And what they're also finding with the GPT-4 128K, if you ground your answer with 128,000 tokens, they even have charts that show where hallucinations in the context windows are more likely to show up. It turns out like 80% way through the text is where it'll often get a little bit more wrong. But they're really measuring how accurately can it pull a fact out of context grounding so it doesn't get it wrong. Again, not perfect, but we're seeing a lot of great progress. And when you can put in 128,000 tokens, that's a lot of factuality you can put in to minimize hallucinations, as Mark says.
Great. This is fascinating. There's time for a couple more questions. And again, if you have any questions, get them in. I have like 5 more minutes. Here we go.
Yep.
So Wilson asks, how do you identify and mitigate biases that are built into the models? And how do you train employees and volunteers to spot those biases?
Yeah, so Ralston, great question. And there's a whole, on the risks part of the course, there's risks, and bias is one of the major risks. And then there is ethical considerations, data security, data privacy, and then a regulatory and legal landscape. With respect to bias, I do think it's important for us to ask ourselves and sort of be aware, which models being used which ways will create biases that might harm the most people. I think that there are a couple things that really jump out to me as the ones where we want to be really thoughtful and sensitive to bias, because it could have a really negative impact on people. One is when you use the system to make high stakes decisions that impact people, especially groups of people, that could be really, really bad. So if you're going to use generative AI to summarize stuff where you give it a corpus and you want to summarize it or evaluate it or something else, that's probably not too subject to big bias risks. If you're using generative AI to screen resumes, you really better make sure that you're measuring the performance of that system and you're trying to identify whether there are disparate impacts of the way that you're using it on folks. And a major point that I make when it comes to bias and any kind of ethical issue, I say ethical considerations are a lot like risk management to society. Just like with risk management, what you want to do is say, what bad things that could hurt society or groups of people in society could happen? You have to anticipate that. Then you have to measure the impact of what is happening and make sure that it's performing the way you thought, and mitigate the likelihood that it does something wrong. So high stakes decisions that could basically disadvantage certain groups, be very careful about that. On image generation, all the models are trained on a corpus of data that reflects the biases in society. So image generation is also an easy way to see a lot of bias. I find that when you're using LLMs as a thought partner and it's generating derivative content on context that you provided to it, the biases, I think, are a lot less problematic. They're still there. You have to always run through things through your own critical thinking. But I think using it as a thought partner where you make the decision, but you're bouncing ideas off of the LLM, which has already been grounded, I think helps to minimize the risk to your company and to society and to other people who could be harmed by it from bias in the models.
Great. Thank you for that. Let me go through and get a couple more questions. There's a whole bunch in here that talk about workers. So should CEOs be concerned with helping shape worker roles such that Gen AI is less likely to displace them? Another one here from Phil, which human skills do you think will remain, at least for a while, immune to ChatGPT? And then also this one, some CEOs are making it mandatory to use generative AI in a role and a part of one's performance. Your thoughts on this? So these are all questions around the changing workforce and the roles that people have.
Yeah, I could try to knock these guys down in quick succession. So with respect to, and you might have to remind me what they were, but I remember the first one was, what role do CEOs have in helping people redefine their roles? I'm one of the people who believes that there's going to be a lot of job impact. And it's not that a lot of jobs are going to be fully automated, but lots of jobs will be partially or heavily automated. And so you might need a lot fewer people doing that job, which means the people doing the job, it'd be awesome if they could do other new things that are highly valuable. And I do think I'm biased because I'm the CEO of Coursera, but providing training programs isn't only about unlocking customer value and improving productivity for the company. Providing training programs, I think, is part of an ethical response to recognizing that there's going to be an impact. And training can not only help the company, but it can help individuals navigate this successfully so that the impact on them, and especially when it comes to economic dislocation, is at least lower. So I think that everyone's going to be looking to the companies to say, help me through this. If you want me to be more productive, help me navigate this myself and learn the skills to not only do my job better, but also free me up to do more valuable things and to be remain a productive part of the business. There was a, what was the second one, Charlene? Do you remember?
Do human skills remain immune?
Yeah, well, I think that cognitive skills that can be easily explained will be skills that can be more easily automated, especially if you could pipe in the right context and if you have models that can handle that pretty well. A lot of people are saying don't really worry too much about the job. Think of it as a job as a bundle of tasks, and certain tasks will be more automated, and then with those tasks that are not, we'll redefine what that job is. I do think that personally, skills around adaptability with other people, whether that is leading other people as a leader, I think adaptability and being able to communicate, anticipate where things are going, supporting people through change. I think leaders will be more important than they've ever been, because change is what will release will unlock the value, but change is about changing people. And leaders are the ones who are fundamentally responsible for doing that. I do. So I think a lot of for leaders, leadership skills, management skills. I think for individuals, collaboration skills. And it was also a bit tough. It's going to be tricky because it's going to be like when GPT-4V came out. You now have something that is not only a copywriter, but also a designer and also a coder. Not completely, but you have this model can do all three things. So it's like, well, what if someone joins your team who was a wicked good copywriter, was a very proficient coder, and also did great designs? Like, not only how would you use that person, but how would that change your role if you're the engineer? And how would it change your colleague's role if you're a designer? So I think that teams of people will need to individually think about, what does this mean for my job? But even more importantly, collectively say, how do we integrate these capabilities into our workflows and our teamwork? And so I do think collaboration, communication, adaptability is going to be incredibly important. And then the final thing I'll just say, because I think it's a little bit of a provocative concept, but as more and more mechanical skills get automated with industry, which has been happening for a long time, and as more and more cognitive activities get automated with generative AI, you're like, well, what's left for humans? I think that the next big phase of the economy is going to be what I call the experience economy, where humans will be craving experiences, because we won't be doing as much mechanical work and we might not be doing as much cognitive work, although you'll probably do both of those just to be healthy and have good exercise. Just like we go to gyms, we'll probably still do puzzles and work out our brains, not because the computers can't do it, but because it's just healthy for us. And what we're going to be looking more and more for are experiences that are created by humans, experiences that are created by computers, and experiences that are created by the combination of those. So I think we're heading more and more to an experience economies, and humans who can create great experiences for other humans are going to be valued by society.
Jeff, that's a great note to end on. We are a little bit over time, but I just want to thank you again, your perspective, first of all, as a CEO, bringing this and the knowledge and the expertise that you have, that you've poured all of that into this course. So if you want more of Jeff, you can see hours and hours of him inside of that course. I cannot recommend it enough. So Jeff, thank you so much again.
Thanks a lot for having me. This has been a lot of fun, Charlene.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And next week, just a quick note, I will be talking a little bit about how to use best practices for marketing and comms in generative AI. And again, I just want to say thank you, Jeff, so much for joining us today. It is a great pleasure, and all the best to you and Coursera.
You too.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.